It all began so suddenly in a quiet city alleyway where a young man was petting a cat. A mysterious woman in a white gown appeared, telling him he'd won a ticket to another world. Still crouching, he looked up at her, completely bewildered by her impossible words. With a small cat perched on his head, he could only manage a confused eh. He wondered why such a beautiful girl was talking to him, a person with zero friends. His mind spiraled, thinking of how he had never even had a girlfriend in his entire life. He was shocked that she knew about this secret spot where he always came to pet the cats. He jokingly offered to let her pet him too, but she bluntly turned him down. Her expression remained completely impassive as she held a small ticket out to him. She presented him with the ticket, which was stamped with the words "Special Privileges." He stared at it, murmuring the phrase "Special Privileges" in utter confusion. He held the Otherworld reincarnation ticket, its strange reality sinking in. She bid him farewell, saying they would meet again as a baffled escaped his lips. A dark portal ripped open behind her, and she seemed just as surprised as he was. In an instant, he was falling through a swirling black void, screaming in terror. His consciousness returned to the sound of a baby wailing in a field of bright light. He wondered where he was, noting how blindingly bright everything seemed to be. A gentle woman's voice could be heard as she looked down upon him with kind eyes. He realized with horror that the crying baby was him, as his mother called him Prince Rufus. He understood then that he had been reincarnated into another world. This new world was Mungard, a place where swords and magic were very real. He soon learned that he had been reborn as a prince in a magnificent kingdom. As a toddler, he realized this royal life was the special privilege from his ticket. As he took his first steps, a group of maids squealed with delight at his cuteness. He sat down with a soft plop, determined to keep up his act as a normal baby. The years passed in a flash, and he grew into a healthy 7-year-old boy. In this world, turning 7 meant it was time for the skill inheritance ceremony. He knew that the skill he would inherit would remain a complete mystery until that moment. A voice from behind him gently asked if he was feeling nervous about the ceremony. He turned to see his 2 older brothers, the other princes, standing in the doorway. They were Gilliam, the first prince, and Reinhard, the second prince of Eridoria. Reinhard reassured him that everyone feels anxious about what skill they will receive. He then smiled, announcing that it was finally time for the ceremony to begin. Reinhard took his younger brother's hand, startling the small prince with his suddenness. As they led him away, Rufus protested that he was perfectly capable of walking on his own. They arrived at a grand, cathedral-like building where the rite would take place. His eldest brother, Gilliam, took a seat of honor to observe the proceedings. Rufus walked nervously toward a glowing crystal orb that rested upon a stone altar. From his seat in the pews, Reinhard watched his little brother with an excited smile. He thought to himself that Rufus was so restless it was like watching a parent at a school event. A high priest solemnly called out the name of Prince Rufus Eridoria. He instructed Rufus to place his hands on the crystal, and the young prince agreed. Rufus reached out with his small hands, preparing to touch the magical sphere. The moment he made contact, the crystal erupted in a blindingly brilliant flash of light. The priest closed his eyes, sensing the immense magical power being released. Rufus stared in awe as the priest announced that a skill had been granted to him. The priest's voice boomed through the hall, declaring it to be the summoning skill. Rufus was a bit let down by the quiet reaction, wondering about his new ability. He assumed that summoning magic must be a very important and powerful skill. He imagined himself conjuring fearsome monsters, like a fanged beast and a brutish goblin. He quickly realized he didn't have the confidence to handle such terrifying creatures. After all, his true dream was to live a simple life surrounded by fluffy animals. It was noted by an unseen observer that Rufus had obtained an incredibly rare skill. Rufus stood before the priest, still trying to process what had just happened. After the ceremony, his brothers approached him with warm, welcoming smiles. Rufus immediately asked them to explain what the summoning skill actually was. Gilliam advised him that the best place to learn would be the Summoner's Guild. Rufus was surprised that a guild existed for a skill that was supposedly so rare. Gilliam explained that it was precisely because only a few people in the kingdom had it. The three princes stood before the guild's imposing door, ready to seek answers. One of the guild members, a man named Bart, was surprised by the royal visit. Reinhard gave a firm, resounding knock on the guild's large wooden door. From inside, a polite voice called out, saying they had been expected. A man with a monocle bowed deeply, welcoming the young prince inside. He introduced himself as Guild Master Selphus, while a nervous girl named Lara bowed as well. Rufus looked at the two of them, confirming that the guild was indeed very small. He wasted no time, asking Selphus to immediately explain the summoning skill. Selphus graciously agreed, gesturing for the prince to follow him to the library. The library was a small, sparse room with only 2 bookshelves against the wall. Rufus was unimpressed, thinking that the room was hardly worthy of the name. Selphus pulled a large, leather-bound volume from one of the shelves. He presented the book to Prince Rufus, inviting him to have a look. Rufus opened the book, his expression turning to one of confusion as he saw the contents. He saw that it was an encyclopedia, filled with illustrations of strange creatures. He asked Selphus about the book, and the guild master confirmed what it was. Selphus explained that the creatures depicted were neither animals nor monsters. These beings were a unique classification of life, known as magical beings. Rufus murmured the new term, his mind trying to grasp this novel concept. He realized these were creatures not found in any book in the royal library. He felt a pang of disappointment, thinking the variety of summons seemed rather limited. Just then, an eager Lara asked Selphus if they could see his summon in action. Selphus smiled warmly and agreed that it would be an excellent practical demonstration. Rufus glanced over at Lara, who was watching them with keen anticipation. Lara became incredibly flustered when Rufus asked her to be the one to perform the summon. Clearing his throat, Rufus prepared to give the command for the demonstration. He playfully commanded a frightening creature to appear, using Lara's name. Lara took a deep breath, focusing her energy to perform the summoning. With a determined shout, she called forth a magical being known as a marmot. From a swirling cloud of magical smoke, a massive, furry shape began to emerge. Rufus watched in stunned silence as the creature materialized before his eyes. The enormous, furry paw of the creature landed softly on the wooden floor. A colossal, unbelievably fluffy marmot stood calmly in the middle of the room. Lara threw her hands up in alarm, startled by the sheer size of her own summon. Rufus, however, was in a state of pure bliss, drool dripping from his mouth. He asked if she could summon anything else, and Lara tearfully said she could not. Selphus then offered to demonstrate another type, much to Rufus's delight. With a focused expression, Selphus invoked his own name to perform a summon. He called out for a magical being named Pardon to appear before them. A small, perfectly round white bird materialized and landed gently on his shoulder. Rufus's face lit up with pure joy as he exclaimed that this one was fluffy too. With boyish excitement, Rufus asks Selphus if he can try summoning. Selphus begins his lesson on the core principles of the summoning skill. He explains that one must form a clear image of the creature. Rufus realizes that the more detailed his mental image, the better. He decides to start simply by attempting to summon a Pardon. The bird's form reminds him of his beloved pet from his past life, Pai-chan. With a powerful memory in mind, he clenches his fist in concentration. He stands tall, invoking his power in the name of Rufus Eridoria. A brilliant flash of pure magical energy erupts from his hand. He loudly commands the Pardon to manifest before him. From within the light, the shape of a bird begins to form. Rufus's eyes sparkle with joy, while Selphus stares in disbelief. The newly formed bird thinks it impossible that he succeeded on his first try. A majestic bird spreads its wings, far grander than Selphus's summon. In a clear voice, the creature makes its grand proclamation. I have arrived. Selphus and Lara stand together, frozen in a state of utter shock. They both gasp in unison, realizing that the summoned creature just spoke. Rufus is equally stunned, murmuring that his pardon talked. He glances over his shoulder, confirming their bewildered reactions. He understands now that a talking summon is an extraordinary event. He greets the bird, wondering aloud why it can speak. His mind flashes back to his deepest wish, to talk with fluffy animals. He remembers the stray cats he loved in his previous, lonely life. A profound and exciting realization begins to dawn on him. If a strong image is all that's needed, can he summon original creatures? His various inner personas begin a chaotic debate on what to summon next. His childish, adventurous side desires a big, strong, and fluffy dragon. But his intellectual, adult side finds such a thought deeply embarrassing. Selphus and Lara watch, completely baffled by the prince's inner turmoil. The guild master hesitantly calls out to the distracted young prince. Rufus's internal adult scolds his childish desires for being so over the top. A stern, mustachioed version of himself lectures the others from a pulpit. This stern persona seems to be the voice of his adult reason. He declares that for a 7-year-old, such thoughts are not embarrassing. The various chibi versions of himself finally seem to reach an agreement. Rufus decides to cast aside his doubts and simply be himself. With unbridled joy, he shouts for the red-eyed white feather dragon. He stands alone on the tiled floor, his command echoing in the hall. A split second later, a hot blush of embarrassment rushes to his face. He covers his eyes in shame, mortified that he actually said the name aloud. The other guild members can only stare, dumbfounded by his bizarre outburst. He peeks through his fingers, sweating nervously at their confused faces. His eyes suddenly go wide with a mixture of terror and awe. A colossal, white-furred paw descends from the shadows above. An immense, serpentine dragon, covered in soft feathers, fills the room. It lifts its head, and a pair of glowing red eyes stare down at him. Rufus whispers that he summoned something far more amazing than he imagined. A concerned guild member quickly grabs Rufus and pulls him to safety. The prince suddenly feels weak, his magical energy completely drained. He realizes with a tremor that another summon would now be impossible. On the floor, Lara is completely paralyzed with fear at the sight. Rufus looks up at the impossibly large creature he has created. The dragon calmly states the room is too small, offering to break a wall. Rufus is shocked, realizing this second summon can also speak. He quickly asks if the massive creature can somehow become smaller. He pleads with the dragon, hoping it can manage the request. The dragon's piercing red eyes fix upon the small prince. It makes a counteroffer. First, Rufus must give a name. With a name, the dragon explains it will be bound to him as its master. It would then be able to freely change its size at his command. Rufus understands this is just like taming a pet. He makes his decision, declaring, from now on, your name is Ragios. The great beast repeats the name, accepting it as its own. It looks down at Rufus and tells him that it is a fine name. Rufus points to the small bird, Pychon, flying happily nearby. He looks fondly at the fluffy white bird on his finger. He asks Ragios if it can shrink down to the same size as Pychon. In a dramatic puff of smoke, the colossal dragon begins to transform. Rufus is hit by a wave of emotion, completely overwhelmed by cuteness. A tiny, puppy-sized version of the fluffy dragon now floats before him. He babbles incoherently about the immense, adorable fluffiness of it all. The tiny dragon notes that it seems unable to shrink any smaller. Unnerved by its master's reaction, it prepares to disappear entirely. Rufus snaps out of it, insisting that puppy-sized is absolutely perfect. He wipes his brow, relieved that he managed to stop it from leaving. He looks at the tiny dragon, his cheeks flushed with affection. He shyly asks if he can hold Ragios for just a moment. He scoops up the tiny, feathery creature and pulls it into a hug. His eyes swirl as he is overcome with pure, blissful happiness. The sensation of the fluff is so wonderful he feels he might ascend. He snaps back to reality, realizing Selphus is staring at him. The guild master murmurs that this has become a very serious incident. Rufus understands he has summoned an unrecorded, sentient magical being. Selphus insists they must report this to the king immediately. Rufus looks at him expectantly, asking who will be the one to report it. Selphus and Lara stare back, the unspoken answer hanging in the air. With a long, drawn-out sigh, Rufus accepts his new responsibility. He walks purposefully down the long, ornate corridors of the palace. He stands before the massive, intimidating doors of the throne room. He announces his presence, stating he has an emergency to report. With a loud groan, the heavy doors swing open before him. He sees his elder brother, Gilliam, seated near the throne. Gilliam looks down from his seat, calling out his younger brother's name. Rufus stands in the doorway, cradling his new fluffy companion. He proudly introduces his creation, the red-ice white feather dragon, Ragios. Gilliam can only repeat the fantastical name, his expression bewildered. Rufus then points to the bird on his shoulder, introducing it as Pychon. He commands his two new friends to offer their greetings to the king. But Ragios speaks first, its voice booming with a sudden, grave tone. It issues a chilling threat, promising no mercy if any harm befalls Rufus. The king wearily commands his son, "Explain it to me in order, Rufus." The scene is set within an ornate, high-ceilinged chamber in the royal palace. Rufus sits across from his father, ready to explain the day's incredible events. The king finds it unbelievable that Rufus summoned a creature unknown to any record. Rufus explains he was taught to simply hold a clear image in his mind. His father questions how such a simple act could possibly summon a real dragon. Rufus nervously confirms that is indeed what he claimed to have done. Overwhelmed by the sheer absurdity of all, the king lets out a cry of frustration. A flashback recalls the terrifying moment Ragios made its threat in the throne room. The massive dragon loomed over Gilliam, warning him not to harm its master. In a grand palace hallway, Gilliam calls out to his younger brother, Rufus. Looking utterly drained, Gilliam officially appoints Rufus as the new guild master. A shocked Rufus asks what will become of Selphus, the previous guild master. Gilliam explains that he has already spoken with Selphus, who agreed to the change. He stresses that Ragios and the others are precious and powerful beings. He instructs his younger brother to compile a detailed report on the entire incident. Rufus accepts his new responsibility to study and report on his magical beings. Gilliam nervously asks Rufus to tell Ragios that he bears the prince no ill will. As Rufus walks away, he reflects on how this has become something truly amazing. A close-up shows a tear of pure happiness welling in the corner of his eye. He thinks about how he finally received official permission to keep his companions. He remembers that in this world, the custom of keeping pets does not exist. He is overcome with joy that he can now legally create his fluffy paradise. A gentle voice calls out his name from the shadows of a nearby archway. It is his mother, the queen, who asks if he was looking for his father. Rufus calls out to his mother, surprised by her sudden appearance in the corridor. He proudly introduces his new friends, Ragios the dragon and Pychon the bird. The queen's elegant smile freezes, her face overcome with vertical lines of shock. Rufus looks on in confusion as his mother stares blankly, processing his words. The single word dragon echoes in her mind, and she begins to swoon. As she faints, Rufus cries out her name in alarm and rushes to her side. Later, the queen rests in her lavish, ornate canopy bed, having recovered. Rufus sits guiltily by her side, thinking he never expected her to actually faint. He reflects on the day's events as he walks down a grand palace staircase. He concludes that the shock of a magical being was simply too much for her. His brothers call out his name, startling him from his contemplative thoughts. Reinhard excitedly explains that their father told them about his incredible new summons. Gilliam is instantly captivated by the creatures, his eyes sparkling with delight. He eagerly asks Rufus if he can touch the tiny, fluffy dragon. He gently pets Ragios, remarking on the fitting nature of the scholar's skill. A more cautious Reinhard asks his younger brother if the creatures are safe. Rufus assures him they are harmless unless he specifically commands them to attack. Gilliam is fascinated, though Rufus notes that Ragios seems to dislike the attention. A sound effect marks the transition to the next part of their conversation. With sparkling eyes, Gilliam eagerly asks Rufus to tell him more about them. The scene shifts to the grand exterior of the castle as night falls. An exhausted Rufus stumbles through the halls, completely worn out from the long day. He bids his sleeping companions good night before collapsing into his own bed. As he falls asleep, his consciousness fades into a dark, grainy void. The darkness gives way to a hazy, cross-hatched, white dreamscape. A figure with long, flowing black hair appears in the whiteness of his dream. Within the dream, Rufus's eyes flutter open as he begins to wake. He rubs his eyes sleepily, looking around and wondering where he is. He turns and sees a familiar figure standing before him in the white void. He yelps in shock, recognizing the mysterious woman who sent him to this world. He remembers seeing her in the alleyway on Earth, the memory hazy but certain. He recognizes her as the woman from that time. The woman calmly confirms his recognition with a simple, quiet yes. She reveals her true identity. She is the creator god of this world, Mungard. Rufus is thrown backward in shock, shouting her title as she explains her role. Utterly bewildered, he looks up at her and asks why she chose him. The god looks down at him, her expression serious and her purpose clear. She gives him his mission. He is to aggressively raise the summoning skill's popularity. Rufus is completely baffled by her modern slang, wondering what she means. The god stands before a seated Rufus, repeating her divine command. Rufus is still trying to process the strange wording of her request. He repeats the odd phrase, his confusion evident on his face. The god asks him directly if he will accept her request. Panicked, Rufus pleads with her to wait and explain things from the beginning. The god looks at him, calmly considering his plea for a proper explanation. She asks if an explanation is truly necessary, much to his exasperation. With a small sound effect, the god finally agrees to his request. The dreamscape transforms, and she appears as a teacher, ready to begin her lesson. Rufus is completely shocked by the sudden and bizarre change in scenery. The teacher god explains that the summoning skill is special and important to Mungard. Her diagram shows that the mana used by the skill circulates, rather than disappearing. Rufus asks how to increase the mana, though he is distracted by her crude drawing. The teacher explains that this is precisely why the summoning skill is needed. A new diagram shows her mana, flowing through a summon to enrich the world. Rufus begins to understand, though he is still bewildered by her strange illustrations. He realizes that this means very few people currently know about the summoning skill. The god confirms that if no one knows about the skill, then Rufus finishes her thought, deducing that the number of users will not increase. She confirms his answer is correct with a cheerful ding-dong sound effect. She explains that the skill inheritance ceremony grants a person their deepest desire. She tells Rufus he inherited the skill because of his abnormal love for animals. The word abnormal echoes in his mind, leaving him momentarily stunned. She says she chose an earthling for their imagination, and her theory was correct. She adds that inheriting a skill also grants the user the ability to wield magic. Rufus is thrilled at the prospect of finally being able to use magic himself. The romance of casting spells fills him with a sudden surge of motivation. The god teacher sternly brings him back to the main topic at hand. Rufus pauses to think, a new and logical question forming in his mind. He tentatively begins to ask her a question about her divine power. He asks why she cannot simply send her mana directly into the world herself. She explains that while it is not impossible, there would be severe consequences. Her drawing illustrates the catastrophic results: quakes, volcanoes, and devastating droughts. She adjusts her glasses, her expression softening as she explains her true motivation. She confesses that she deeply loves the world of Mungard and all its people. However, she warns that if the world's mana runs out, all life will perish. The creator god explains her choice, citing his rare love for animals and rich imagination. She formally tasks him with spreading the summoning skill throughout the world. Rufus eagerly accepts, envisioning a perfect cycle that creates an infinite fluffy paradise. The god looks down upon the young prince, her mission now entrusted to him. For the first time, a gentle, genuine smile graces the creator god's face. She tells Rufus that she is truly glad she was the one to choose him. Her form begins to fade as she tells him that she is counting on him now. Rufus feels a strange sense of déjà vu as the world around him distorts. With a cry of alarm, he realizes he is being dropped into the void once more. He jolts awake with a sudden gasp, his body shooting upright in his bed. Sunlight streams into his ornate bedroom as he sits up, catching his breath. He looks around, dazed and sweaty, trying to process the vivid dream. Wondering if it was real, he is answered by Ragios, who confirms it was not a dream. Rufus sits up in shock as Ragios relays a telepathic message from the creator god. The dragon's words confirm his promise, and the reality of his mission sinks in. He recalls the god's teacher persona, knowing his divine pact was absolutely real. Rufus asks where Pychon is, and Ragios explains the bird was sent back. When asked why it remains, Ragios says it was told to be its master's hug pillow. Feeling bad for Pychon, Rufus is reminded he can simply summon the bird again. Standing before a grand window, he begins the incantation in his royal name. Pychon appears in a flash of light, chirping its own name enthusiastically. It lands on his hand, offering a new greeting, which Rufus accepts with a smile. The tiny dragon, Ragios, then asks what its master has planned for the day. Rufus announces his intent to introduce his new companions to everyone in the castle. His plan takes him to the training grounds, where the clang of steel rings out. From behind training dummies, his brothers spot him approaching with Ragios. Rufus proudly stands in the Eridorian Knights' training grounds with his small dragon. He smiles, excited to finally show off both Ragios and the newly summoned Pychon. He overhears Knights whispering, and Ragios wonders if their cuteness is too conspicuous. A gloved hand suddenly rests on his head, asking if he's here for training. It is his brother, Reinhard, who affectionately pats the young prince's head. Reinhard beams, impressed that his little brother is already so diligent. Rufus greets him, and Reinhard turns to see their other brother, Gilliam, nearby. Reinhard notes that Gilliam has also been training with his usual intensity. He remarks to Rufus that watching Gilliam was interesting at first, but grew tiresome. As Reinhard leads him away, Rufus can only follow his energetic older brother. From across the training yard, the elegant figure of Gilliam can be seen. Gilliam approaches with a bright smile, asking to be included in their fun conversation. Reinhard laughs nervously, insisting it was nothing important as Rufus smiles awkwardly. His energetic brother then makes a hasty retreat, calling out Gilliam's name. Gilliam turns to Rufus, confirming that inheriting a skill allows one to use magic. Noticing his brother's nervous fidgeting, Gilliam asks him what is the matter. Rufus timidly asks if he can test what kind of magic he is able to use. Gilliam asks if he didn't learn about that at the guild, but Rufus admits he is not. Seeing the wide-open space, Gilliam suggests it's the perfect place to try. With a gentle smile, he decides they should start with a simple, basic spell. A soft light emanates from his glove palm as he chants the word light. A glowing orb appears, which he explains is simple daily life magic for illumination. Impressed, Rufus agrees to try the spell, which Gilliam says is good practice. With great effort, Rufus holds out his hands and shouts the incantation. But nothing happens. His hands remain empty, and the air is still. He tries again, shouting light, with even more force, but with the same result. Gilliam looks on with concern, asking his little brother if he is all right. He advises Rufus to visualize the magic gathering first, then chant the spell. Rufus stares at his empty hands, wondering if this is even possible for him. He asks Gilliam to teach him more, and his brother agrees, despite a bad feeling. With one last try, Rufus collapses, a pathetic puff of smoke escaping his lips. Gilliam rushes to his side as Rufus despairs that his magic life is already over. Dejected, Rufus returns to the guild, calling out for Selphus and Lara. They greet their young guild master with surprise as he enters the room. He stands before them, announcing that he has an important question for them. He asks what magic summoners can use, and his guildmates react with visible shock. Seeing them sweat nervously, Rufus realizes the answer is not what he hoped. Selphus delivers the devastating news. The summoning skill allows for no other magic. Rufus's world shatters as he realizes his dream of casting spells is truly over. Later, Gilliam tries to console him, telling him not to worry so much. He suggests it's fine as long as the people around him can use magic. But Rufus remains despondent, lamenting the loss of his own magical fun. As he sulks, his eyes widen slightly as a new thought begins to form. Back in the quiet of the guild, a dark aura of inspiration starts to build. He begins to chuckle to himself, a manic energy filling the air around him. He turns to his bewildered guildmates, announcing that he has a brilliant idea. If he cannot use magic, he declares, he will simply have his summons use it. Selphus and Lara can only stare, stunned by his sudden, energetic revelation. He reasons that to light a candle, he just needs a being that can use fire. He paces the floor, his mind racing as he tells himself to think hard. He stops, hand on his chin, trying to recall a creature from the encyclopedia. A faint illustration of a lizard-like being flashes in his memory. He snaps his fingers in triumph, remembering the perfect summon for the job. With a dramatic pose, he shouts his command, "Manifest, Salamander." A cloud of thick smoke erupts in the middle of the guild hall. A polite voice from within the smoke asks if the young master is called. From the smoke emerges a small, lizard-like creature with a flame on its head. Rufus is instantly overwhelmed, falling over backward as he squeals about its cuteness. Cradling the new creature, he marvels at how its charm differs from his others. A nervous Lara asks from a distance if the creature is hot to the touch. The salamander calmly replies that, of course, it is not hot at all. It explains that its body is only hot when it is in an attack state. To test its power, Rufus asks the salamander to burn a bowl of paper. The tiny creature unleashes a surprisingly massive torrent of brilliant flame. Rufus is blown back by the force of the fire, exclaiming in sheer awe. He excitedly praises the salamander for its terrifyingly awesome power. A wide smile spreads across his face as he realizes the skill's true potential. The salamander puffs out its chest, blushing from its master's praise. In that moment, he understands. This is the true magic of the summoning skill. He stands tall and declares that Guild Master Rufus is deeply and truly moved. Selphus admits he had wrongly placed limits on the skill's possibilities. Lara enthusiastically agrees, amazed at this creative new application of their power. Rufus looks upon his inspired guildmates with a proud and knowing smile. As their leader, he stands before them and commands them to hold their heads high. Standing before a kneeling Selphus, Rufus declares his mission to spread the summoning skill's renown. "Let's do our best together," he says with a smile, earning a determined yes in reply. He then turns to his new salamander, formally bestowing upon it the name Cayenne. Rufus asks if Cayenne likes the name, and the creature enthusiastically says that he does. His brother, Reinhard, watches the scene from a short distance away, having observed the exchange. Later, Rufus crouches down, asking Kyan just how much firepower he can produce. A mischievous glint appears in Rufus's eye as he thinks of ways to test this power. He jokingly suggests they get a better view by simply burning down the entire castle. Laughing, he dismisses his own joke, but a stern voice suddenly calls his name. Rufus turns in shock to see his mother, the queen, standing in a grand doorway. Her face is a mask of pure horror as she asks him to repeat what he just said. With a start, Rufus can only exclaim his mother's title in surprise. The queen stands firm, her gaze fixed on her son as she demands an explanation. Rufus looks on, panicked and sweating, unable to form a coherent response. He realizes that with his mother's appearance, the atmosphere has become a tense battlefield. The queen's suspicious gaze then falls upon the small, strange creature at his feet. Seeing an opportunity, Rufus snaps to attention as his mother asks about the child. He holds up Kyan, formally introducing the newly summoned magical being, a salamander. The queen's eyes widen in shock as she lets out a sharp, horrified gasp. Murmuring the word lizard, she faints dead away, and Rufus cries out in alarm. Reinhard catches her, reassuring his brother that the shock was simply too much for her. He holds up a hand, telling a frantic Rufus not to worry about their mother. Later, a remorseful queen apologizes and asks Rufus to properly introduce her to his companions. Rufus is surprised by her sudden change of heart, stammering in response to her request. She explains that she failed to greet them properly the day before as well. She admits with a pained expression that she has been constantly worried about him. Rufus summons his companions, who formally introduce themselves, Ragios, Paichon, and Kyan. The queen is amazed, whispering that they can all speak. She tentatively asks if she might be allowed to touch them, and Ragios graciously accepts. With a soft touch, her fingers sink into the incredibly fluffy feathers of Ragios' coat. She marvels at his softness as Paichon lands gently on her shoulder. Her warm gaze then turns to the quiet and patient Kyan. Looking closely, she smiles and remarks on his surprisingly cute face. She apologizes for her earlier fear, but Kyan politely says no apology is needed. Completely charmed, the queen smiles and asks them all to take good care of Rufus. She departs with a newfound serenity, leaving her son and his companions in the hall. Rufus is stunned, realizing his mother came all this way just to say hello. He stands in the empty hall, surprised by the sincerity of her visit. Back at the guild, Rufus watches as Lara yelps and scurries away from Kyan. He puts a hand to his chin, wondering if Lara has a phobia of salamanders. Lara trembles in a corner, far too frightened to even observe the creature properly. Rufus notes that while fire is a useful ability, Lara's fear is a significant problem. He then spots Lara gazing longingly at Paichon, who is perched calmly on some books. From across the room, Rufus observes her admiration for the small, white bird. An idea sparks in his mind. Perhaps a bird-type summon would be less intimidating for her. His eyes light up with a new resolve to help his struggling guildmate. He raises his hand, preparing to perform a new summon specifically for Lara. "Manifest, Firebird," he commands, his voice filled with magical energy. A tiny, impossibly round bird appears, and Rufus clutches his chest, overwhelmed by its cuteness. He thinks to himself that it's too cute, with a different kind of charm than Paichon. As the new creature chirps, Rufus declares himself a genius for creating something so adorable. He turns to present the new magical being to a hesitant Lara. The tiny bird lets out an adorable chirp while perched on the prince's finger. Rufus asks Lara what she thinks, suggesting this one might be more to her liking. The bird introduces itself as Oaken, a firebird. Lara's fear instantly vanishes, her eyes sparkling with adoration for the tiny creature. She gently holds the round, feathery bird in her cupped hands. She wonders aloud if a creature this gentle is one she might be able to summon herself. Elsewhere in the guild, Rufus finds Selphus poring over books in the archive. The young prince approaches his vice guild master, asking what he is working on. Selphus smiles, holding a book, eager to explain his important new project. He says that they must create a new encyclopedia to document all the new magical beings. Rufus agrees, realizing the practical necessity of cataloging his creations. A flashback shows a comically bad drawing of a cat-like creature in an existing book. Rufus calls over another guild member, a young man with short blonde hair named Bart. He then turns to a dark-haired member named Ray, asking if either of them can draw. Both men bluntly state that they have absolutely no artistic talent whatsoever. Rufus then turns his hopeful gaze towards Laura, his last remaining option. Still cooing over Oaken, Laura simply shakes her head without looking up from the bird. With a look of grim determination, Rufus realizes the arduous task falls to him alone. He presents his first attempt, a laughably crude, childish scribble of Kyan the salamander. Kyan himself looks at the drawing and declares it awful, questioning Rufus's effort. Selphus suggests hiring a court painter, but Rufus finds that idea deeply unsatisfying. Just as he despairs, a brilliant, new idea strikes the young prince. With a dramatic flourish, he shouts a new command, "Manifest, Art Guma!" A large, fluffy silhouette begins to materialize from a swirling cloud of magical smoke. An enormous, fluffy white bear wearing a beret appears, announcing itself with a friendly bear. Overjoyed, Rufus immediately runs forward to embrace the adorable, fluffy creature. He buries his face in its soft fur, exclaiming how wonderfully fluffy it is. Holding the bear close, he officially bestows upon it the name Beard. Rufus tells Beard that he wants to see its power in action right away. He asks the bear to draw a portrait of Ragios, who poses with a smug expression. Beard takes out a sketch pad and, with a flurry of strokes, begins drawing with incredible speed. In an instant, it produces a stunningly detailed and majestic portrait of the dragon. Selphus is speechless, admitting that not even a court painter could work with such speed. Rufus asks if Beard can draw in other styles, and the bear eagerly agrees. It then sketches a passing noblewoman in a completely different, almost surreal art style. A new voice calls out to Rufus, saying they have heard what's been happening. Rufus turns to see his parents, the king and queen, entering the guild hall. He calls out to his father, who looks on with a deeply weary expression. The king sighs, noting that the number of his son's creatures has certainly grown. Rufus tells his menagerie to greet his father, but the king panics and holds up his hands. "No, no, stay right where you are," he shouts, his voice echoing with frustration. He points at Rufus, ordering him to simply stay quiet for a while. Rufus pouts, thinking his father didn't have to be quite so harsh. He walks away, feeling he has suddenly been left with nothing to do. Feeling bad for interrupting his guildmates, he decides to leave them to their work. A bright idea strikes him. He could give his summons a tour of the castle. But he quickly reconsiders, realizing that would only make them stand out even more. He sighs, feeling that just spacing out in his room would be far too boring. With a thoughtful finger to his chin, Rufus remembers something important. He recalls Reinhard mentioning exploring the castle basement and finding something. The idea of a dungeon sparks an internal debate, adventure versus caution. His sensible side warns that their father would strongly disapprove. But his adventurous side imagines finding incredible treasures and new discoveries. The inner council argues, questioning the point of a life without adventure. His adventurous impulses physically silence the more cautious voices in his head. With a strained smile, the internal debate is settled. A conclusion is reached. Having made his decision, Rufus leads his summons purposefully down the hall. The tiny dragon, Ragios, trots beside him, asking where the basement is. Rufus explains it's a special area only the royal family can access. He remembers Reinhard mentioning a strange, ominous black door hidden within. They arrive at a pair of massive, imposing doors marking the entrance. Filled with childlike glee, he wonders what amazing things are waiting inside. His face is a perfect picture of pure, starry-eyed, adventurous excitement. He pushes the heavy doors open, a nervous sweat on his excited face. In the darkness, the terrifying silhouette of a headless knight awaits. A flashback shows the king ordering Rufus to behave himself for once. Rufus realizes with dread that they have absolutely failed to be good. Facing the monster, he understands they are now in a terrible predicament. He decides to use Kyan's flame for light, and the salamander agrees. The small creature ignites a flame atop a candlestick, lighting the way. They venture cautiously down the long, dark, stone-walled corridor. The ancient stone walls seem to press in from all sides. The path ahead is dark, foreboding, and silent. They walk deeper into the empty and imposing stone passage. Holding the candle, Rufus notes they've come far, but found nothing. He begins to think his brother Reinhard was just joking about this place. Suddenly, a sharp clicking sound echoes from the walls around them. Rufus freezes, turning his head as he wonders what the noise was. With a deafening rumble, a heavy iron portcullis slams down behind them. He turns in surprise, asking what just happened in the dark passage. He wonders why it closed, as Ragios cries out a sharp warning. A dark figure with a raised sword looms menacingly right behind him. The young prince lets out a silent gasp of pure, unadulterated terror. He recognizes the spectral knight on its terrifying steed as a Dullahan. He can't believe such a creature is actually in the castle basement. He realizes the gate was a defense mechanism triggered by their presence. The only way forward, he understands, is to defeat this monstrous guard. The Dullahan spectral horse lets out a terrifying, silent whinny. Rufus panics, internally screaming that this is impossible and he wants to go home. The headless knight charges, its blade aimed directly at the frozen prince. A brilliant flash of light and sparks explodes just in front of him. Rufus stares in wide-eyed shock at the sudden, unexpected intervention. A sword blocks the attack, as a voice asks what fun he's having. Reinhard stands smiling, telling Rufus he should have invited his brothers along. Overjoyed and relieved, Rufus can only cry out his brothers' names. Gilliam calmly states that they were right to follow their little brother. Reinhard explains the basement is forbidden because it's full of such traps. He cheerfully adds that Rufus would be in huge trouble if he got caught. Reinhard turns his full attention to the spectral knight before them. He casually approaches the Dullahan, his sword held at the ready. He tells the creature they'll have to deal with it first. With a confident smile, he greets the monster with a simple yo. He remarks that it has certainly been a while since their last meeting. A stunned Rufus asks if his brother has actually fought this thing before. Reinhard confirms he did, back when he was the same age as Rufus. He admits it was tough then, but wonders how it will fare now. He swings his sword, but the blade passes harmlessly through the night. The attack dissipates into nothing, having no effect on the spectral form. Rufus looks on, utterly confused by what he just witnessed. He realizes with a sweat drop that the sword didn't even connect. Reinhard just laughs, noting that the Dullahan has gotten much stronger. Gilliam announces that a door has opened and they should move on. The three princes walk together through a newly revealed archway. They continue down another corridor, a new barred gate before them. A winged, stone-like gargoyle stares down at them from its perch. Gilliam observes that a gargoyle is a much weaker monster than a Dullahan. A small, almost imperceptible smirk plays on his lips. He tells Rufus this is a perfect chance to show him something cool. The gargoyle is instantly incinerated in a blast of fire. Gilliam looks on, wondering if his display was too quick and pointless. Reinhard praises his brother's skill and then asks for a taste. Rufus can only think that he already knew his brothers were strong. Walking behind them, he feels useless, only able to be protected. He trails behind his two older brothers, dwarfed by their power. A look of worry and deep insecurity crosses the young prince's face. They enter a new chamber, swarmed by demons and the Dullahan. Rufus panics, realizing they are now surrounded by even more enemies. He meekly gestures for his powerful brothers to handle the situation. Reinhard places a reassuring, gloved hand on his little brother's shoulder. He tells Rufus with a smile that there are times a man must fight. Rufus protests his inability to fight, but Reinhard says he'll be fine. Raggio speaks up, confirming that what his brother says is true. The dragon insists they can fight just as well, asking for the command. Rufus looks uncertain for a moment, but Raggios assures him of their power. Gathering his resolve, Rufus decides to trust in his loyal companion. He points forward and commands Raggios to attack, who readily agrees. The tiny dragon hops forward and lets out a small puff of dark energy. The entire horde of monsters and the wall behind them disintegrate into ash. Raggios turns back, asking its master if the battle is already over. Reinhard, who is preparing for a fight, is stunned by the anticlimax. He expresses his bitter disappointment at not getting to join the fight. He decides to fight the stragglers himself, commanding Rufus's summons. He points his sword at Cayenne and Beard, declaring he has chosen them. Rufus agrees, and Beard lets out a happy bear, accepting the order. His brothers watch in horror as the sounds of brutal combat fill the air. Beard salutes, reporting its success as Rufus praises his team's good work. Reinhard admits the display was brutal, and Rufus just laughs nervously. With the path now clear, the way forward is open for them. Rufus touches his cheek, a single bead of sweat on his face. The three brothers stand together in a vast, empty stone plaza. Rufus observes that there is nothing here but the walls and a pedestal. Gilliam calmly reveals that the pedestal contains a hidden mechanism. A single drop of his blood falls onto the stone with a soft plip. Rufus cries out in alarm, but Gilliam tells him not to worry. A loud grinding sound echoes as Rufus asks his brother what's happening. A section of the stone wall grinds open, revealing a hidden passage. Gilliam explains the lock is keyed to react only to royal blood. Rufus understands this prevents anyone but the royal family from entering. When asked what is inside, Reinhard simply tells him to go and see. He steps into a breathtaking vault filled with glittering treasures and weapons. He whispers in awe, amazed that a real treasure room was hidden here. Gilliam explains this place serves as an emergency shelter and armory. Rufus asks if the whole family knew, and Reinhard confirms they did. He tells Rufus that he is only learning of its existence right now. He realizes this knowledge is part of his inheritance as a royal. His dragon, Raggios, suddenly makes a sound, getting his attention. The dragon senses the presence of a strong companion behind the wall. Rufus repeats the word companion, his expression filled with curiosity. He looks at the solid wall, wondering if it could be a magical being. Gilliam confirms there is a space beyond, but even he cannot break it. Rufus approaches the wall, pondering how they could possibly get inside. As a small hand touches the stone, the surface ripples with light. He pulls his hand back with a startled cry of surprise. The wall becomes transparent, revealing the dark silhouette of a chest. A deep voice echoes from within, asking who dares disturb its slumber. The young prince is frozen to the spot, his face a mask of terror. Inside the hidden chamber, a single treasure chest rests upon a pedestal. From the entrance, Rufus can only stare, utterly bewildered by the sight. The booming voice repeats its question, demanding to know who they are. Rufus swallows hard, his eyes wide with fear and anticipation. The lid of the ominous chest begins to creak slowly open. A strange, anticlimactic sound emerges, leaving Rufus completely confused. The chest continues making a strange noise, baffling the three princes. In a cheerful voice, the chest asks if its scary entrance surprised them. It explains it had always wanted to try that, much to their dismay. The dramatic tension in the room completely evaporates in an instant. Reinhard suggests dismantling the trap box, but it insists it is not evil. Rufus asks if it has been all alone, and the chest confirms it has. The chest declares it is looking for a new master, surprising Rufus. He looks at the small, sentient chest with pity and curiosity. It asks Rufus directly if he will become its new master. He realizes if it needs a new contractor, it must have had one before. It explains that the person who gives it a name becomes its master. Reinhard brightens, eagerly offering to be the one to name it. He suggests generic names, but Rufus tells him it's not that simple. He asks Ragios if one can claim a being summoned by another person. With a confident expression, Ragios confirms that it is possible. However, it can only happen if the original summoner is no longer here. The somber implication of those words hangs heavy in the air. He realizes it has likely been waiting here, alone, for a long time. Reinhard admits he is out of ideas, much to the chest's disappointment. He turns his attention to his younger brother, Rufus. Reinhard suggests that Rufus should be the one to give a name. The chest happily agrees, formally requesting a name from the young prince. Rufus asks if it has truly been waiting all this time for someone. It confirms this, saying it spent the time planning its grand entrance. He realizes with a sweat drop that was the result of its planning. He cycles through several name ideas based on the word trap. An image of famous Roboticat appears, but he dismisses the idea. Then a simple, perfect name comes to his mind. He points decisively and declares its name will be Torichan. He asks the chest with a gentle smile if that name is all right. The chest erupts in a brilliant light, startling the young prince. The brothers and Ragios stand frozen as the light fills the vault. The light from the chest becomes almost too bright to look at. The light subsides, and it announces the master re-registration is complete. It then declares that it is now his servant, much to Rufus's shock. Rufus shouts that he had no intention of making it his servant. He declares that magical beings are friends, and Torichan is a friend too. The chest asks if it is a friend, and Rufus confirms it enthusiastically. The chest's lid flaps open and closed in a clear expression of joy. Rufus watches, pleased to see how happy his new friend is. He realizes his dreams are expanding beyond summoning only animal types. The camera pans over the dungeon's destroyed wall from earlier. Gilliam remarks that he never knew such a hidden room existed here. He wonders aloud if their new friend, Torichan, holds any secrets. Gilliam asks what's inside, and Torichan says it holds many things. He asks to see some, but gets no response, much to his annoyance. Rufus cheerfully asks Torichan to show them, and it happily agrees. It spits out a bizarre collection of brutal weapons and household items. The three princes are left completely speechless by the strange assortment. Rufus identifies its ability as a form of fourth-dimensional storage space. Reinhard holds up the slipper, questioning if it can be a weapon. He notes that each weapon seems better than those in their own armory. He becomes giddy with excitement, asking the chest for more praise. Amidst the clutter, Rufus's eyes are drawn to a familiar-looking object. He picks up the hilt, certain that he recognizes it from somewhere. He presses a button, and a brilliant beam of light erupts from the hilt. The beam of light smacks him right in the face with a loud thwack. Reinhard identifies it as a legendary weapon used by ancient heroes. Rufus worries that this item is dangerously close to breaking the world's immersion. He decides to ask Torichan for a much more conventional weapon. Torichan produces a massive, ornate greatsword, which he takes. He strains under its weight, commenting on its ancient appearance. His brother encourages him to go ahead and give the sword swing. Reinhard watches his younger brother with a look of keen interest. As Rufus swings the blade, Reinhard calls out his name in surprise. A colossal wave of energy erupts from the sword, striking the far wall. With a deafening roar, the dungeon wall completely shatters. Rufus and Reinhard stare, their faces frozen in utter shock. A wide view reveals a massive, smoking hole in the stonework. Rubble lies scattered as stunned. Stammering sounds fill the air. Rufus panics, exclaiming over the unbelievable destruction he just caused. Gilliam and Ragios rush to his side, asking if he is all right. Trembling, Rufus says he's fine, but the castle wall is not. Reinhard wonders how such a powerful weapon came to be there. He confirms to Rufus that he absolutely recognizes the sword. With profound awe, he reveals that it is the legendary Excalibur. Rufus internally processes that he just casually found the holy sword. Reinhard marvels at the blade's unmistakable and brilliant radiance. Overcome with joy, he never dreamed he would see it himself. Raggio's dryly notes Reinhard's adoring gaze is just like Rufus's. Rufus recoils, horrified, wondering if he truly acts like that. Reinhard turns to his little brother, asking if he can have it. As Rufus hesitates, Gilliam shouts a warning from the side. Reinhard pulls Rufus into a tearful hug, thanking him profusely. Rufus is mortified, having witnessed his brother's uncool side. Gilliam suggests they should leave the destroyed dungeon for now. The three princes begin their long ascent up the stone stairs. They walk quietly down a grand palace corridor, Raggio's trotting along. Gilliam reminds them to keep the existence of the vault secret. Suddenly, the three brothers stop dead in their tracks, surprised. Their father, the king, stands before them with his arms crossed. He demands to know the source of the tremor that shook the castle. The king's gaze is stern, and he knows they are responsible. Reinhard, forgetting their trouble, tells his father to look. He excitedly shows off the magnificent, shining blade of Excalibur. Gilliam and Rufus scream in unison that he is an absolute idiot. But the king, a fellow enthusiast, is also captivated by the weapon. With a menacing smile, he summons all three for a debriefing. The scene shifts to the throne room, seen through an ornate window. The king presides as his sons explain their disastrous adventure. Rufus introduces the sentient magical being Torachon the Trapox. He explains it belonged to a summoner from a bygone era. The king asks if the chest contains any other notable weapons. Rufus asks Torachon, which cheerfully confirms it has everything. Intrigued, Rufus decides to test it by naming legendary arms. He asks for Durandal, and Torachon confirms its presence. Next, he asks for the holy spear Gungnir. It has that too. Nervously, he asks about the demon's spear Longinus. It is there. The king, sweating, declares this collection is simply impossible. Rufus is amazed that the little chest really does have everything. The legendary Excalibur rests on the king's grand desk. Using his appraisal skill, the king confirms the sword is genuine. His expression darkens as he turns to the matter of punishment. He sternly reminds them that entering the basement was forbidden. What has been done is done, but a suitable punishment is needed. He calls out the names of his two eldest sons, Gilliam and Reinhard. They are tasked with creating a complete inventory of every weapon. Reinhard is horrified, but Gilliam's eyes sparkle with scholarly glee. The king then turns his attention to his youngest son, Rufus. Rufus must use the inventory to verify the weapons inside Torachon. As a final blow, he orders Excalibur returned, crushing Reinhard. The next day, the sun rises over the magnificent royal palace. Rufus, with beard and Raggios, heads to the designated salon. He feels a heavy guilt for dragging his brothers into his mess. He knows he should have been the only one to be punished. Suddenly, he hears a pained groaning from inside the room. He finds Reinhard passed out on a desk, buried under paperwork. A close-up shows the exhausted prince snoring softly in his sleep. Even in his dreams, he mutters about not losing to desk work. He mumbles that he's a strong man who will never give up. From another part of the room, sounds of fury can be heard. A voice shouts that they wanted to be the one to do it. It is Gilliam, enraged that he must share this glorious task. Rufus sweats, realizing the suffocating tension in the room. For Gilliam, this shared task has turned his paradise into hell. The king's punishment was a stroke of genius against both sons. Gilliam is being punished by not being allowed to do it all. Reinhard wakes, groaning as he hands over a stack of finished work. The two brothers immediately begin to bicker over the task. Their childish argument fills the air with even more tension. Rufus decides he can't stand it and tells his summons they're leaving. He gathers the completed list to begin his part of the work. He thanks his loyal summon, Beard, for carrying the heavy stacks. In a separate, quiet study, he summons Torichan to begin. The sentient chest appears with a puff of smoke and a cheerful hello. Rufus asks if it's all right to begin checking the contents. He explains that he will read out names for Torichan to verify. He lists off names, which the chest confirms it has in storage. As the tedious work continues, Ragios dozes peacefully nearby. The hours pass quietly in the grand, book-lined room. Rufus sighs, having finally made it through the first few stacks. He lets out a breath of relief, the work being truly exhausting. He asks Torichan if it holds anything besides weapons. Torichan confirms it has magic tools, piquing Rufus's interest. He asks to see one, and the chest happily opens its lid. A small, white cube with a black circle on it tumbles out. Rufus holds the strange object, wondering what it could be. He presses a button and is blasted by a powerful gust of wind. He realizes it's a fan, which Torichan calls a wind box. He spots an emerald inside, correctly guessing it's the power source. Curious, he asks what other non-weapon items are inside. Torichan spits out 2 potions, muscle energy and nectar. Rufus stares at the second bottle, recognizing the name Nectar. His memories tell him it is a powerful revival potion. He breaks into a cold sweat. This shouldn't exist in this world. Panicked, he frantically orders Torichan to put it away at once. Torichan, the sentient chest, rocks gently as it recalls its contents. It casually mentions the final category, weapons of mass destruction. A horrified Rufus immediately begs Torichan to never take those out. The sheer shock of the revelation causes the young prince to collapse. He realizes that all of these items are from a different unknown era. His mind races, wondering about Torichan's mysterious original master. He nervously speculates that the chest holds weapons from an ancient civilization. Rufus recalls a history lesson he learned from a dusty old tome. The lore told of a great, ancient war between gods and demons. The gods, on the verge of defeat, armed humanity as their allies. After the gods fell, humans used those weapons to vanquish the demons. Rufus ponders the grave implications of this half-forgotten history. He asks Ragios if the demon race might still exist somewhere. The ancient dragon replies that even it does not truly know. Ragios' vague answer fills Rufus with a sense of dread for the future. The dragon then points out that his master has stopped working. Startled, Rufus scrambles back to his desk, resolving to finish his task. He spends the remainder of the day hunched over the stacks of paper. A voice from the doorway asks how his work is progressing. Rufus looks up to see his father, the king, entering the study. He reports that the work is going well, despite the massive quantity. He has only verified the first few pages, but everything is accounted for. The king, seeing the amount, tells him to only check a few random pages. As he reads a list, the king is stunned by the legendary class items. He gives Rufus a stern order to never take any of them outside. He asks if he's taken more out, but Rufus quickly says he hasn't. As night falls over the palace, the long day of work is finally over. With one last stroke of his pen, Rufus completes his assignment. He collapses onto the desk in utter exhaustion, crying out that he's done. He reflects on how tiring a full day of desk work is for a child. He desperately wants a bath, but is far too tired to even move. More than just a bath, he finds himself craving a relaxing hot spring. He wonders if the culture of hot springs even exists in this world. A thought strikes him. He doesn't have a water-type magical being yet. If he has summons for fire, surely he can summon one for water. He finds a wooden bucket, planning to make a small foot bath. Standing in an empty room, he powerfully calls out a new command. He concentrates his magic, his hand outstretched before him. A beautiful, ethereal water spirit materializes from a cloud of steam. Holding up the bucket, Rufus asks her simply to fill it with water. He smiles, repeating his simple request for water in the bucket. The spirit surprises him, offering to produce hot spring water instead. She gently confirms that she can indeed create a genuine hot spring. Rufus is utterly stunned by this wonderful and unexpected development. He asks if she is serious, and the spirit, Aqua, confirms it. Aqua asks to borrow the bucket, and Rufus eagerly hands it over. She gracefully takes the wooden bucket into her watery hands. A gentle stream of magical water begins to pour from her fingertips. The bucket fills with steaming, bubbling liquid, rich with magic. Aqua presents the finished foot bath, inviting him to try it. Rufus hesitantly lifts his leg to dip his foot into the water. His foot makes a small splash as it enters the steaming bath. A wave of pure, blissful relaxation washes over the young prince. He marvels at how the fatigue from his long day is melting away. The text explains it is a true hot spring with powerful healing properties. He feels his body becoming lighter as Ragios dips a curious paw in. A flash of light appears as Rufus feels the water's potent magic. He notes that the effect is real, as Ragios's fur seems to glow. He immediately decides he needs to try this in a much larger bath. He muses that he wishes he had a full-sized bathtub in his room. He comments on the water's mysterious and powerful beautifying effect. Ragios, perched on his shoulder, expresses confusion over beautification. A voice from behind them suddenly asks about this beautifying effect. It is his mother, the queen, who has overheard them and is intrigued. She raises an eyebrow, her interest clearly captured by the conversation. Rufus quickly introduces his newest summon, Aqua the Undine, to her. The queen remarks on the unusual creatures her son keeps summoning. Aqua explains her ability to create hot springs with beautifying effects. The queen's eyes sparkle with delight and excitement at the news. Rufus adds that it also helps with fatigue and stiff shoulders. Overjoyed, the queen declares they must try it immediately and leads the way. A bewildered Rufus is swept away by his mother's sudden enthusiasm. They arrive at the grand, circular tub of the royal bathhouse. The queen, hands clasped, eagerly asks Rufus to have Aqua begin. Rufus asks Aqua if she can fill the large tub, and she happily agrees. Aqua gracefully raises her arms, beginning to fill the bath with magic. The entire tub fills with bubbling, steaming hot spring water. The queen and Rufus watch in amazement as the bath is prepared. Then, the queen turns to her son with an unexpected invitation. Rufus is horrified when she asks if he's getting into the bath too. She teases him gently, asking if he dislikes bathing with his mother. A flustered Rufus tries to preserve his modesty, but has no choice. He sinks into the water, blushing, while his mother sighs in bliss. The queen touches her face, amazed at how smooth her skin feels. Rufus admits the water is amazing, observing the women's excitement. He looks at his own arm, noting his skin is as smooth as a baby's. He muses that all the fatigue from his hard work has vanished. As he relaxes in the water, a new, brilliant idea begins to form. He wonders what the knights would think if they could use this bath. He briefly considers letting his brothers try the hot spring first. He turns to his mother, remarking on how incredible hot springs are. The queen agrees, but laments the difficult chore of drying her long hair. Rufus realizes this world lacks hair dryers, but it does have magic. The words wind magic echo in his mind, sparking a new idea. He splashes out of the bath, asking his surprised mother to wait. He invokes his power, commanding a new type of being to manifest. A beautiful fairy appears, cheerfully greeting her new master as darling. The newly summoned fairy, Tia, smiles coyly at Rufus. Now robed, Rufus asks Tia to dry his mother's hair with her magic. Tia happily agrees, promising to make the queen's hair shiny and smooth. The tiny fairy Tia floats behind the queen, telling her to hold still. With a gentle smile, Tia conjures a sparkling ball of wind magic. The queen closes her eyes, feeling the warm, magical breeze on her face. In an instant, her long hair becomes perfectly fluffy and dry. She touches her lustrous locks, her eyes wide with pure, amazed delight. From the doorway, two maids gasp in awe at the stunning transformation. They praise the queen's now beautiful, glossy hair as Rufus looks on. The queen turns to a slightly startled Rufus, telling him she loves this. She muses over the wonderful combination of Aqua's bath and Tia's wind. With a radiant smile, she declares she wants this luxurious treatment every day. A shocked Rufus questions if she truly means every single day. At the guild, Rufus accepts her request, commanding a summon in Selphus's name. He orders the manifestation of a salamander, and a small one appears. Selphus holds his new summon as Rufus claps his hands with excitement. Rufus congratulates him, but Selphus gives his guild master all the credit. Selphus then notes that Lara also appears to be making progress. Indeed, Lara stands with her hand outstretched, having summoned a tiny firebird. Tears of pure joy stream down her face as she whispers her success. "Guild Master, I did it," she shouts, presenting her new firebird. Rufus praises her amazing effort, and she thanks him, flustered with joy. The intense concentration has left her dizzy, her eyes swirling with fatigue. "Are you all right?" Rufus cries, rushing toward her as she stumbles. Despite her exhaustion, Lara vows to summon even more magical beings. Selphus gently suggests she take a break and get some fresh air. A dizzy Lara agrees, saying she'll be right back as she heads out. Suddenly, the Grand Guild doors slam open with a loud, heavy thud. Rufus and Selphus jump in surprise at the forceful, unannounced entrance. They see the visitor and immediately begin to apologize for their casualness. The queen stands majestically as Lara bows deeply, flustered and apologetic. The queen gently asks Lara about the dark circles under her eyes. Rufus quickly explains that Lara has been undergoing intense summoning training. Understanding, the queen turns to Rufus and asks him to prepare the bath. She smiles, adding that the hot spring is excellent for recovering from fatigue. Rufus and Lara stare in stunned silence, confused by the sudden invitation. Sometime later, the queen cheerfully invites a bewildered Lara to join her. The rumor of the miraculous onsen begins to spread throughout the castle. Whispers of its amazing properties first circulate among the servants and maids. Soon after, the nobility hear the news and desire to try it themselves. The gossip even reaches the stoic knights of the royal guard. The trend spreads from person to person, its scale and popularity growing rapidly. And so, the situation continued to escalate far beyond anyone's initial intent. The royal bathhouse is now constantly packed, the craze completely out of control. Rufus smiles nervously, remarking on how much the crowd has grown. The commotion unfolds within the walls of the grand and stately palace. Rufus is summoned and now sits alone before his father in the throne room. The king, looking utterly exhausted, tells Rufus he has been too conspicuous. Knowing what's coming, Rufus bows his head and offers a sincere apology. His father sighs, admitting he never imagined the skill would cause such chaos. Ragios smugly thinks that the king has no room to argue. The king decides he will be the one to inform the queen of his decision. He firmly orders Rufus to ensure no more hot spring water is produced. As Rufus turns to leave, his father stops him, having one more matter. The king steeples his fingers, choosing his next words with great care. He remarks that Rufus has grown and that it is now a suitable time. He then delivers a shocking royal command. Rufus is to get married. Standing before the throne, a stunned Rufus can only stammer the word married. He protests that he is only 7 years old, which is far too young. The king clarifies this is a matter of state for the royal family's future. Rufus's mind reels as he processes the reality of a political marriage. He reflects that he died a bachelor and has no idea what to do. Remembering his true purpose, he asks if he should still popularize his skill. His father confirms this, and Rufus clenches his fist with renewed purpose. Later, walking with Ragios, Rufus feels a pang of hunger. The thought of food gives him an interesting idea concerning his summons. Ragios notes that magical beings don't actually need to eat food. Rufus thinks that sharing a meal would make the act of eating more enjoyable. He decides to ask the head chef about having a barbecue outside. The royal chef looks confused, having never heard the term barbecue. Rufus is shocked that such a common activity is completely unknown here. He explains the concept of grilling meat and vegetables on a metal grate. The chef immediately warns him that cooking outdoors is far too dangerous. He explains the constant and very real threat of assassination by poison. Rufus is horrified by the harsh and dangerous realities of this new world. He then asks what kinds of food they do cook on a metal plate. The chef suggests baked sweets, like the cookies that appear over Rufus's head. Cradling Ragios, Rufus looks hopeful as he thanks the chef for the suggestion. The chef then apologizes, stating that animals are not permitted in the kitchen. Walking away, Rufus laments the severe lack of good sweets in this world. He begins to fondly reminisce about the delicious desserts from his life on Earth. He pictures cream puffs, sweet dango, bombkachin, and his beloved pudding. His mouth waters as he imagines a vast and wonderful world of sweets. He arrives back at the Summoners Guild, a brilliant new plan forming. "Manifest, Tessin Chef," he cries, summoning a multi-armed robot. Selphus and Lara are shocked to see a magical being that specializes in cooking. Rufus proudly explains that it is a cooking type iron golem. He officially bestows upon the golem the name Tessin. For its first test, he asks his new culinary summon to make pudding. Tessin gestures, indicating it has a problem with the command. The golem points to a list it has just produced from chassis. It informs Rufus that it lacks the necessary ingredients and cooking tools. Rufus promptly tasks a guild member, Ray, with acquiring the listed items. He then summons Torachan, greeting the sentient chest with a cheerful hello. He asks the chest if it happens to contain an oven for baking. Torachan produces an item, and Rufus eagerly tells it to bring it out. A modern microwave oven appears before them with a dramatic thud. Rufus and Lara observe that it looks just like a toaster oven. Rufus asks Torachan if it has an instruction manual for the strange device. He looks at the booklet, but it's written in an indecipherable ancient script. He asks Ragios if he can read it, but the tiny dragon refuses. Rufus then turns to Torachan, asking if it knows how to operate it. Ragios reads the microwave's ancient manual, which instructs to first check the magic crystal. Impressed, Rufus praises Torachan, who cheerfully says it has plenty of spares. Rufus recognizes the crystal, realizing it's the same type that powered his fan. He looks at the microwave, wondering if its crystal is still charged. Ragios reads that the crystal must be replaced when its color fades. There is no charger. Torachan boasts that it has so many spare crystals, they're practically rotting away. The guild member Ray arrives, announcing he has brought the requested ingredients for Lord Rufus. Rufus thanks him, and Ray explains the chef simply asked what he was planning. With a flourish, Rufus commands his robot summon. "All right, Tessin, make the pudding." Tessin's multiple arms were into motion, a blur of impossible mechanical speed. Rufus watches, dumbfounded, admitting he can't even follow what the robot is doing. In moments, Tessin presents several cups filled with a hot, steaming mixture. Lara asks if it is a warm dish, but Rufus explains it must be chilled to set. He considers using cold magic, but worries about maintaining a constant temperature. He turns to his all-purpose problem solver, asking Torachan if it has a refrigerator. He describes it as a box filled with cold air, and Torachan understands. Torachan confirms it has one, much to Rufus's utter shock and delight. With a dramatic flourish, Torachan produces a large, modern-looking refrigerator. Rufus sweats, thinking that no matter how you look at it, it's a refrigerator. He and Lara wait patiently in front of the magical appliance for the pudding to chill. While waiting, Rufus, Selphus, and Lara pass the time by studying some books. Deciding enough time has passed, Rufus approaches the refrigerator with a hopeful smile. He opens the door, revealing the rows of perfectly set, glistening pudding cups. A close-up shows the smooth, flawless surface of the chilled desserts. He takes one out, announcing that it's time to finally try it. He brings the first cool, jiggly spoonful to his lips. A wave of nostalgic bliss washes over him as he savors the taste. "Yes, this is the taste," he exclaims, turning to a curious Laura. Laura takes a bite herself and immediately declares that it's delicious. She and Selphus marvel at the sweet, cool, and jiggly texture, a new sensation for them. Rufus smiles and offers a spoonful to his tiny dragon companion, Ragios. The majestic dragon tentatively takes a small bite from the spoon. Rufus watches with bated breath as Ragios chews the dessert thoughtfully. With a small gulp, the dragon swallows the pudding. Rufus holds the cup, waiting for the powerful creature's verdict. Ragios admits that it has never before held any interest in food. With a look of serene satisfaction, it declares that pudding is a truly delicious thing. Rufus smiles warmly, happy to have shared the wonderful flavor with his friend. He notes that even for summons who don't need to eat, pudding has become a favorite. He decides he must share this wonderful dessert with his mother and father. An idea strikes him as he searches for a natural way to present it. That evening, the royal family gathers for dinner in the grand dining hall. The queen remarks on another delicious meal as the table is cleared. Rufus proudly announces that he has prepared a special dessert for them. A servant presents a perfectly crafted pudding on a small plate. The queen looks on in wonder, remarking that she has never seen such a dessert. Rufus smugly says he had the head chef make it from the same recipe. The chef, however, happily clarifies that the third prince taught him how to make it. Rufus freezes, a look of sheer panic on his face as his lie is exposed. He mentally curses himself, realizing he forgot to tell the chef to keep quiet. The king looks at him with a knowing, deeply suspicious expression. Rufus blurts out that it wasn't him, but his summoned Tessin chef who taught the recipe. The king stares back, utterly confused by the name Tessin. With no other option, Rufus shouts for Tessin to appear. A magical summoning sound effect fills the air. Tessin the robot chef materializes at the dinner table, acknowledging the command. Reinhard wonders if it's in destroy mode, while the king tells Rufus to calm down. Reinhard cries out for his mother as he catches the queen, who has fainted again. The king can only stare blankly at the chaos that has engulfed his dinner. Amidst the pandemonium, the pudding sits untouched on the table. Gilliam, completely unfazed, eyes the dessert with keen interest. He takes a scoop of the glistening pudding with his spoon. He brings the spoon to his lips for the first taste. "Delicious," he whispers, a look of surprise on his face. His eyes sparkle as he realizes he's eating a food of the ancients. Rufus asks how he knew of pudding. Gilliam replies he only knew its name and traits. Reinhard, still holding his unconscious mother, looks on in confusion. He shakes his head, thinking he must have imagined seeing the golem before. Steam vents from Tessin as it prepares to address the royal family. The robot announces it has returned to its normal mode. It explains that it taught the chef so that others could enjoy the wonderful pudding. Gilliam gushes to the queen that pudding is a truly wonderful food. The queen, now revived, chews a bite with a cute, thoughtful expression. She blushes slightly, admitting that it is indeed very delicious. Reinhard and the king are both stunned by how good the simple dessert is. Rufus muses that the texture and flavor create a feeling of pure happiness. He feels a sense of relief, as if the delicious dessert has earned him forgiveness. Later, the queen mentions that Reinhard and Gilliam were discussing an inspection tour. Rufus, mid-bite, asks what an inspection tour is. Reinhard smiles, explaining they are scheduled to visit the Flute Duchy. Rufus recognizes the name of the duchy, recalling it from his studies. A map shows the capital city surrounded by the 4 great duchies of the kingdom. Rufus asks if there's a problem there. Reinhard explains their influence is waning. He states that as royalty, his visit is meant to boost their morale and power. A direct visit from the royal family, he explains, is always a major event. It will reaffirm their bond with the crown and help them regain their strength. Rufus ponders the complex political situation of the 4 great duchies. His thoughts turn to his own secret duty in this new world. He recalls the creator god's plea for him to popularize the summoning skill. A look of determination settles on his face as he comes to a decision. He looks up at his kind and smiling older brother, Reinhard. Reinhard notices his little brother's serious expression and asks what's wrong. Rufus looks up at him and asks, "May I come with you on that inspection?"